What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday to you. I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Hope you are all doing well and enjoying yourself. There is a lot to talk about right now because the Cincinnati Bengals have announced final roster. They've announced a lot of different things. Now, there are still some things in flux, some things to be figured out, but we know a lot about what they're doing with the roster, what it's looking like, and we have some things to share with you. We're going to be brief because Bengal Jim and friends are going to be talking some football with you all in just a little bit on all of the Cincy Jungle channels, so you're going to want to be there for that, and we want you to check that out. So we'll be brief in terms of everything we've got going for you with this episode to talk about the Bengals roster. So happy to be with all of you here. Let's talk. Let's just go right to it. And then there's some announcements to be made afterwards. So we'll get to that. But right here, 53-man roster is set per Cincy Jungle and all of the major outlets here. You can check that out. Here is the link for those joining in the live chat and whatnot. There you go. 53-man roster set. There is more to be talking about here and potentially more moves to come. But some surprises, not huge surprises, but some. They went light at quarterback. Two of them, Joe Burrow, Brandon Allen, Jake Browning did not make it. We still have yet to see the practice squad finalized at this point. Browning could be one of those guys. We'll see what happens, but they went light at quarterback too, but that's what they've traditionally done with Zach Taylor. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, a little bit heavier there. We thought they'd go 3. They did keep Travion Williams at the back end there. We will see exactly what they decide to do here because there are, as I mentioned, there's some tweaking and different things that'll be coming up both very immediately and then a couple weeks down the line because of some, a little bit of disheartening news surrounding some players here. But light at wide receiver 5. Now, some more news on this in just a little bit, but the Bengals go Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Stanley Morgan, Trent Taylor at wide receiver. So that's where they're looking at going at wide receiver right now, 5. No Michael Thomas. They may be looking at bringing him back depending on how that all shakes out. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. Zach Taylor addressed the media and others after the roster was set here. You got light at tight end, Hayden Hurst, Drew Sample, Mitchell Wilcox, no Thaddeus Moss, did not do enough to get himself on the final roster here. And so that is something to keep an eye on in terms of, are they going to grab someone else here? Drew Sample's been hurt. Hayden Hurst hasn't played because he's the starter and they haven't wanted to risk him. Mitchell Wilcox had an injury as well. So this is a really, really tenuous position group right now. Hurst has gotten a lot of praise, rightfully so, throughout training camp and whatnot from his teammates and everybody, but still not a very deep group, and some that have had some injuries going in the preseason. Offensive lineman, presumed starter Cordell Volson, but you've got, of course, the 5 starters that you think: Jonah Williams, Cordell Volson, Ted Karras, Alex Capileo, Collins. Hakeem Adeniji did do enough in the preseason to get himself on this roster. There was a nice write-up. We shared it with you yesterday on the Happening Headline Show. Hakeem Adeniji, Matt Minnick did a nice write-up on Cincy Jungle talking about some nice reps he had in the final preseason game. A rough beginning to the preseason for him, but a guy they think just has that versatility, can play either tackle spot in a pinch, has experience at guard, and so a guy they think can be moved around and as a movable backup piece. Same thing with Trey Hill, an interior lineman they like. It can do a couple of different things. Prince, a guy who was forced to start in the postseason last year, struggled then, had some struggles in the preseason again, but they like him as that backup tackle as well. Deontay Smith, another one of those developmental swing tackle. They've tried him in a lot of different spots here. Maybe he's a guy they have some great plans for down the road here. But again, another developmental guy. I think a lot of us like Deontay Smith, but it's, there's the injuries. You got to show us a little more, but still a lot of clay to mold there. And then, of course, Jackson Carman sticking on the roster. Does not look like he won that starting job at left guard. Just a few too many struggles in the preseason. Volson's floor just seemingly higher at this point than Carmen's floor. The ceiling may not be as high either, but The floor is higher, and those lows just aren't as low with Volson. So the presumed starter at this point is Cordell Volson at left guard. As we go into week 1 here against the Steelers, defensive lineman, pretty predictable here. We kind of knew this was one of the areas that was most set, especially as it goes with the starters. You got Hendrickson, Hill, Reeder, and Hubbard. Osai, Tupou, Carter, Sample, Gunter. They did keep Khalid Kareem. He is going to be placed on injured reserve, so that's going to tweak some things with the roster. We'll talk more about that in a second, but gone is Tyler Shelvin. That's the big surprise, along with Michael Thomas at wide receiver. Gone is Tyler Shelvin. Was not getting snaps in the preseason, was not making an impact, did not make an impact on this roster since being drafted. A guy I personally really liked for a lot of different reasons, had a soft spot for the big guy, just kind of thought he was an AFC North throwback. I thought with what Cleveland liked to do, with what Pittsburgh liked to do, with what the Ravens like to do but could not do because of injuries last year, that is running the football and doing different things. I just thought even as a niche player, he would have a good future with this team, and it just never materialized. We'll see what happens there. But former 4th-round pick Tyler Shelvin gone from the 53-man roster. So that is a big, kind of a big deal there. But you got to hope now Tupou continues to step up. Osai, you hope there's a nice growth there after missing all of his rookie season. Carter showed a lot in the preseason. You like that. Sample had some nice moments. And Gunter, the 7th-round pick, makes the roster here. So they've got 10 here. Khalid Kareem is going to be placed on injured reserve, so there is still some fluidity in a couple of spots on this roster. Linebackers went light here with 5. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Keem Davis, Gaither, Marcus Bailey, and Clay Johnston, who had an outstanding preseason, is one of the backup linebackers there. So light at linebacker with 5. They usually, you'll see Wilson and Pratt out there a lot. Davis, Gaither, kind of a package niche player, and then Bailey, same kind of thing with him, special teamer, and Johnston, probably assuming he will do the same thing there. But those are your 5 linebackers. Cornerbacks, again, some surprises, maybe not to some. You've got your starters, Awuzie, Hilton, and Apple. They all make it. Flowers, who had a nice preseason as he was asked to start with sitting the true starters there. Flowers makes it. Alan George gets himself on the roster. Good for him. Jalen Davis. I think the Alan George placement on the roster goes hand in hand with Cam Taylor-Britt, who is on the roster, but he also, it was announced by Zach Taylor, he is going to be placed on probably short-term IR return. Will be gone for at least the first month, it would seem, and then could be called back. He did have surgery on the core. Unfortunately, this was one of those things, a few weeks, he'll be okay, a few weeks. And then, of course, come final roster time and all of that, you just kind of knew that it was going to be a little longer term than it was played out to be, and or that we had hoped. So Taylor-Britt is going to be placed on IR. Safeties, you look there, you got 5 of those here. Jesse Bates with the asterisk, because as of right now, he does not count against the 53. That will likely change very, very soon here, especially with the IR designations that will be forthcoming. So that will probably change very, very soon. Von Bell. And then, of course, you got Dax Hill. Tyson Anderson, the rookie, makes it. And the other Michael Thomas makes the roster here as a backup safety. Of course, they still have Brandon Wilson on the PUP list, so he will be out for the first handful of games as well. He has not practiced at all so far. We're coming back from the injury from last year. So Brandon Wilson still waiting in the wings there. We'll see if he does come back. An interesting situation there. Chris Evans has impressed a lot as a kick returner. Wilson, a couple of years removed from an outstanding year as a kick returner, not so much last year, and then the injury. So, where does he fit in on this team down the road? He has barely been talked about, and, he hasn't been playing and all of that, but a guy still to kind of keep an eye on with is Brandon Wilson. So think about that. And then you go to the specialists. Again, a little bit of a surprise here. I ate some crow. Not that I necessarily wanted it to play out this way. It just seemed that Drew Chrisman was going to be the guy potentially to finally unseat Kevin Huber. Did not do that. Kevin Huber makes the final roster. He is the team's punter for right now, and you have the battery from last year. Clark Harris, So Cal Adamitis does not get the nod at long snapper. Drew Chrisman does not get the nod at punter. And then, of course, you have Evan McPherson basing that. And then the Bengals terminated the contracts of safety Trayvon Henderson, Noah Spence, who had some nice moments in the preseason. He is no longer on the team. And then wide receiver Mike Thomas, as I mentioned. And then they have waived. And so these are the players entering the waiver wire. Adamitis, as I mentioned, quarterback Jake Browning, Chrisman, Devin Cochran, Dominique Davis, who showed a few things, Nick Eubanks, the tight end that they grabbed very, very early in free agency, Lamont Gaillard, who was injured, did not make the roster. Nate Gilliam, another guy that they picked up late, he did not make the roster. You got Clarence Hicks, the linebacker, cornerback Delonte Hood, who had a lot of snaps this summer and in preseason did not make it. Trenton Irwin, that may be a guy they look at doing a couple of different things. Raymond Johnson had some impressive moments, defensive end Raymond Johnson III. We'll see if they try and keep him around. Keandre Jones, the linebacker, also waived. Kwame Lassiter, another name to keep an eye on in terms of bringing him back in some capacity. Thad Moss, what does the future hold for him? We're not totally sure. Desmond Noel, injured. He was a guy who had a couple of nice reps as well. Jock Patrick, man, poor guy. He just can't catch a break, can't get on this roster, despite how well he plays in the preseason and despite all of the weirdness that he's had to endure, COVID preseasons and whatnot. He did not make the roster prior. A great summer for him. Did not make the roster. Justin Rigg, rookie tight end, undrafted free agent, maybe a guy they try and keep on the practice squad going forward. Had the touchdown in the last game there to Grayscales. The linebacker, Shelvin, the big name, and Tariquius Tisdale, the defensive tackle, also waived by the Bengals. So those have been kind of the moves there. And let's get to some things that Zach Taylor said on Tuesday as it pertains to the roster, what may be coming up with the team and the like. So let's get going with that. I will share this. This is also on Cincy Jungle. We'll pin this link in the live chats for you folks as well. But let's keep going here. Zach Taylor, several players are about to be placed on IR. A veteran, it could be re-signed, and this is from Drew Garrison. Again, trimmed it down to 53 players. This is from Marissa Contepelli relaying the news that I just mentioned, that Khalid Kareem and Cam Taylor-Britt will be placed on IR. Definitely short-term IR for Taylor-Britt. It would seem, based on previous reports. Khalid Kareem, man, when he's in there, he makes the most of his snaps, but injuries and everything just keep piling up for him. Has to be frustrating. He does have a hamstring injury. I don't think that's very serious, but those can linger and you got to rest them. Otherwise, they just keep popping back up. So the team may be in the defensive line market, per Jeff Hobson of Bengals.com. So they may be scouring the waiver wire. Now, the problem, of course, now, based on their success last year, the Bengals are deep down the waiver wire line. So they'll have to kind of wait their turn, but they will scour the waiver wire. I will talk about a few players that may be of interest to the Bengals that were released from other teams, for better or for worse. So we'll talk about that in just a second, and then we will get out of here because we got to make way for Bengal Jim, who is having former Bengals punter Pat McAnally on the team, as well as the great James Rapine, who does heads up All Bengals, and of course the great Bengals podcast, the Locked On Bengals podcast. He will be joining Bengal Jim and friends to talking football with Jim, James, Jamie, and Tom. A great show ahead on this Tuesday night coming up here. But again, the Bengals could be in the market for a defensive lineman. They are placing, or will be placing, Cam Taylor-Britt and Khalid Kareem on IR. Short-term IR could also be in the mix for Mitchell Wilcox. What does that mean for Thad Moss? What does that mean for Justin Rigg? All of that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens there. And then, of course, Sample coming back from the injury. Prince has a biceps injury. We'll see exactly how that affects him. And then, of course, now Jay Morrison of The Athletic reports that the Bengals are trying to potentially get back Mike Thomas, a guy that has worked with Zach Taylor for a number of years, dating back to the Rams, a guy they like on special teams, a guy they like as a reserve wideout. A little bit shocking that he did not make the team. I kind of felt like, the first 5 spots were pretty sewn up, and Thomas having one of those for the wide receiver spots, thinking that they would keep 6 and then have a Trent Taylor, a Trenton Irwin, or somebody like that round out the group. But they were going to try and get back Mike Thomas, especially as they tweak with things, get guys on IR, figure out the Jesse Bates situation and whatnot. So that is some of the items and that will be forthcoming throughout the week as well. Now, 3 players that I can think of that may make sense for a number of different reasons. You heard Jeff Hobson talk about defensive line help for the Cincinnati Bengals. Does that mean recently waived Christian Covington, a guy who started games for the Bengals a couple of years ago? He was just released. A little bit of a shocker. Is he going to be a guy that they look at for potential defensive line help? Maybe, maybe not. Then you've also got some other players out there. I haven't seen exactly what happened to him yet, but Tyler Johnson, a wide receiver a lot of people like from Tampa Bay, he was a surprise cut. So we'll see what the interest is there. And then, of course, the Raiders getting rid of Alex Leatherwood, a guy that, some people thought the Bengals would draft at some point, maybe even in the second round. The Raiders grabbed him in the middle of the first round. By the way, a couple of disastrous draft classes for the Las Vegas Raiders of late in terms of high picks. You can go see the litany of all kinds of different things, not giving out 5th-year options to a number of players, not keeping, you look at the issues with Henry Ruggs, Damon Arnett, Cleveland Farrell, another guy that's been kind of, had some issues. And then, of course, you look at now Alex Leatherwood, who was released. Now you sit here and you say, well, I mean, he didn't show a lot, very poor PFF scores most of the time with the Raiders, but with questions with Carmen, questions with Prince, questions with, in terms of injury and different things happening on the offensive line, might he be a guy that they want to take a flyer on, especially now that he is on the waiver wire, he is out there floating around? Might he be a guy that they want to take a flyer on? 32 teams said no. They approached reportedly from Ian Rappaport, the Raiders approached every team about trading for Alex Leatherwood, and every team said thanks, but no thanks. We're good. And so now you look at it, and Leatherwood's out there. Do the Bengals take a chance now that there is no trade that's needed or anything like that? Might they go more for depth, that sort of thing? We don't know, but those are a handful of players at some spots that raise some questions that may make some sense for the Bengals in a number of different ways. Tyler Johnson, former Buccaneers wide receiver. You talk about Leatherwood from the Raiders, and then of course Christian Covington, another one out there. So those are some names that are floating out there. But right now, the Cincinnati Bengals have mostly their 53-man roster set. A nice suggestion here from Ken Singleton, OJ Howard, another one that was released, another player that was released by the Bills. He may be a guy they look at for some depth as well. So we'll see exactly what happens there. And I don't know. Well, the Bengals are going to be, they're probably going to bring in maybe a player or two from the outside based on some of the IR moves they may make. And then, of course, they've got some others to think about internally. But right now, most of the Bengals roster is set. There are questions at tight end, questions on the defensive line, as Jeff Hobson noted. And then, of course, there are some questions at wide receiver. If they do bring back Mike Thomas, is he just the 6th guy and that's who they keep? Do they go with 5 again and bring Mike Thomas back and make another corresponding move? We'll see. Practice squad yet to be announced, but there are a number of candidates that the Bengals waived today that should be eligible for it. We'll see exactly what they do to round that out. But again, we hope that you've been paying attention to CincyJungle.com for the news here. We thank you for reading there. We thank you for tuning into this show. Keep it tuned in just a little bit at 8 Eastern. Bengal Jim and friends are going to be taking the air and doing a really cool show with former Bengals punter Pat McAnally and, of course, James Rapine joining that. So that'll be a great show. But wanted to get you this roster update as final cuts came about on Tuesday, and some interesting moves, some predictable ones, most of which we knew was going to happen. There weren't that many starting roles up for grabs, but still some moves that were made. That's going to do it. Keep it to cincyjungle.com for your news, opinions, analysis, breaking news, all of that. Keep it to the Cincy Jungle podcast channel on your favorite audio stream, or go subscribe to that channel. You can get this show, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk, as well as Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. And, of course, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel right there for the Orange and Black Insider stuff. Go do that and click the bell to be notified. So when you get all the notifications when we go live, when we got new stuff coming out. You can like the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. That's always there for you. So a lot of different avenues for you to get your Bengals coverage through us. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of the shows we've got coming up down the pike for you. Bengals regular season right around the corner. Pittsburgh Steelers coming to town. Got to be excited about that. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. We'll be back with more on this show tomorrow night, John Sheeran and myself, and much more on the podcast channel. Keep it tuned there. Keep it to cincyjungle.com. Take care.